Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Cole Phillips, author of The Adventure of the Twisted Truths and host of the Book and Dagger. Today we're continuing our read along of The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, and we are at last getting to the part where Bilbo creeps into the mountain to spy out what he can and do what he's been hired to do. So let's jump right into it. Chapter 12 Inside Information. So basically, after they've gotten through the door, they stood in the dark for a long time, debated until at last Thorin speaks. Now is the time for our esteemed Mr. Baggins, who has proved himself a good companion on our long road, and a hobbit full of courage and resource far exceeding his size, and if I may say so, possessed of good luck far exceeding the usual allowance. Now it is the time for him to perform the service for which he was included in our company. Now is the time for him to earn his reward. Anyway, so this is basically Thorin's just fancy way of saying, oh, it's time for Bilbo to do his work, even though Bilbo's been putting in most of the work throughout most of the book, and he's been getting the dwarves out of mess after mess. Anyway, though, so Bilbo is familiar with this, his Thorin style as well. So he says, if you mean you think it is my job to go into the secret passage first, O Thorin, Thrain's son Oakenshield, may your beard grow ever longer, he said crossly. Say so at once, and have done. I might refuse. I have got you out of two messes already, which were hardly in the original bargain, so I am, I think, already owed some reward. But anyway, he says he eventually goes in, of course, because that's what he's been hired to do. So but he asks who will come with him for a bit at least. And he did not expect a chorus of volunteers, so he was not disappointed. Feely and Keely looked uncomfortable and stood on one leg, but the others made no pretense of offering, except old Balin, the lookout man, who's rather fond of the Hobbit. He said he would come inside at least, and perhaps a bit of the way too, ready to call for help if necessary. The most that can be said for the dwarves is this. They intended to pay Bilbo really handsomely for his services. They had brought him to a nasty job for them, and they did not mind the poor fellow doing it if he would, but they would have done their best to get him out of trouble if he got into it, as they did in the case of the trolls at the beginning of their adventures before they had any particular reasons for being grateful to him. There it is. Dwarves are not heroes, but calculating folks with a great idea of the value of money. Some are tricky and treacherous and pretty bad lots. Some are not, but are decent enough people like Thorin and company if you don't expect too much. Anyway, so Balin and Bilbo go into the mountain a little ways. Balin stops a little ways in and wishes Bilbo good luck. And then Bilbo proceeds to creep down the rest of the tunnel. He loosens his dagger in his sheath, puts on his ring, and he's going down the tunnel, and he realizes it's beginning to get warmer and warmer, and he sees a faint glow ahead. And there's an unmistakable gurgling noise of some vast animal snoring in its sleep down there in the red glow in front of him. So Bilbo stops. He basically, as I say, he fights a battle in the tunnel to whether go back or go forward. He eventually goes forward, and as he reaches the end of the tunnel, he gets the main part of the cavern, and he sees the dragon for the first time. There he lay, a vast red golden dragon, fast asleep. A thrumming came from his jaws and nostrils, and wisps of smoke, but his fires were low in slumber. Beneath him, under all his limbs and his huge coiled tail, and all about him on all sides, stretching away across the unseen floors, lay countless piles of precious things, gold wrought and unwrought, gems and jewels, and silver red stained in the ruddy light. Smaug lay with wings folded like an immeasurable bat, turned partially on one side so the hobbit could see his underparts and his long, pale belly crusted with gems, and fragments of gold from his long lying on his costly bed. Behind him, where the walls were nearest, could dimly be seen coats of mail, helms and axes, swords and spears hanging, and there in rows stood great jars and vessels filled with a wealth that could not be guessed. Anyway, so Bilbo goes through there. He picks up this big, great two-handled cup as heavy as he could carry. Takes one look at Smaug and then darts back up the tunnel. And as he's running, he thinks, I've done it. This will show them. More like a grocer than a burglar, indeed. Well, we'll hear no more of that. Neither did he. Balin was overjoyed to see the hobbit again, and as delighted as he was surprised. He picked Bilbo up and carried him into the open air. It was midnight, and clouds had covered the stars, but Bilbo lay with his eyes shut, gasping and taking pleasure in the feel of the fresh air again, and hardly noticing the excitement of the dwarves, or how they praised him and patted him on the back and put themselves and their families for generations to come at his service. Anyways, the dwarves are celebrating, passing the cup from hand to hand, when suddenly a vast rumbling woke in the mountain underneath, as if it was an old volcano that had made up its mind to start eruptions once again. The door behind them was pulled nearly to and blocked from closing with a stone, but up the long tunnel came the dreadful echoes, from far down in the depths, of a bellowing and a trampling that made the ground beneath them tremble. So, yeah, basically they left Smaug out of their calculations, just thought he would sleep the whole time when they stole the treasure out. This says dragons may not have real much use for their wealth, but they know it to an ounce as a rule, especially after long possession, and Smaug was no exception. Basically, he had passed from an uneasy dream in which a warrior, although insignificant in size, provided with a bitter sword and great courage, figured most unpleasantly, to a doze, and from a doze to wide waking. There was a breath of strange air in his cave. Could there be a drop from that little hole? He had never felt quite happy about it, though it was so small, and now he glared at it in suspicion and wondered why he had never blocked it up. Of late, he had half fancied he had caught the dim echoes of a knocking sound from far above that came down through it to his lair. He stirred and stretched forth his neck to sniff. Then he missed the cup. Thieves! Fire! Murder! Such a thing had not happened since he first came to the mountain. His rage passes description, the sort of rage that is only seen when rich folk that have more than they can enjoy suddenly lose something that they have long had but never before used or wanted. Anyway, so he gets mad. He flies out of the mountain, shaking and roaring, and his only thought is to hunt the whole mountain until he had caught the thief that had torn and trampled what was once his. He issued from the gate, the waters rose in fierce whistling steam, and up he soared, blazing into the air and settling on the mountain top in a spout of green and scarlet flame. The dwarves heard the awful rumor of his flight, and they crouched against the walls of the grassy terrace, cringing upon boulders, hoping somehow to escape the frightful eyes of the hunting dragon. They would have all been killed if it had not been for Bilbo once again. Quick, quick, he gasped. The door, the tunnel, it's no good here. Roused by these words, they were just about to creep inside the tunnel when Bifur gave a cry. My cousins, Bomber and Bofur, we have forgotten them. They are down in the valley. They will be slain, and all our ponies too, and all our stores lost, moaned the others. We can do nothing. Nonsense, said Thorin, recovering his dignity. We cannot leave them. Get inside, Mr. Baggins and Balin, and you too, Philly and Killy. The dragon shan't have all of us. Now you others, where are the ropes? Be quick. Those were perhaps the worst moments they had been through yet. But anyway, so they lower the ropes and pull up Bofur and Bomber, who fortunately, last chapter he said, "Oh, I'm too heavy for the ropes." Fortunately, he's not too heavy for the ropes. He must have lost some weight in Mirkwood when they lost their stores. Anyway, they pull up their tools and bundles of storage, and then a whirring noise was heard. A red light touched the points of standing rocks, and the dragon came. They had barely time to fly back to the tunnel, pulling and dragging in their bundles, when Smaug came hurtling from the north, licking the mountainsides with flame, beating his great wings with a noise like a roaring wind. Anyway, so he eats the ponies and blasts the side of the mountains with flame, and eventually goes back to his silence and sleeping, and he's not asleep, but he basically goes back in the tunnel and doesn't calm down, but he stops his rampage. Anyway, so the dwarves and Bilbo are sitting in the tunnel, and the dwarves all start to get mad. They blame Bilbo. They're like, "Why'd you bring away the cup?" And Bilbo angrily asks, "What else do you suppose a burglar is to do? I was not engaged to kill dragons. That is a warrior's work, but to steal treasure. I made the best beginning I could. Did you expect me to trot back with the whole horde of Thror on my back? If there's any grumbling to be done, I think I might have a say. I'm sure it reflects great credit on your grandfather, but you cannot pretend that you made the vast extent of his wealth clear to me. I should want hundreds of years to bring it all up if I was 50 times as big and Smaug as tame as a rabbit." So, of course, the dwarves apologize, and Bilbo says that he's going to creep back down the tunnel and try to find out what he can. So he puts on his ring and he's creeping down like he's done the first time. But this time, Smaug is not asleep. Smaug is pretending to be asleep. So when Bilbo steps out into the cave, Smaug smells him even if he can't see him. So he speaks and says, "Well, thief, I smell you and I feel your air. I hear your breath. Come along, help yourself again. There is plenty and to spare." Because he thinks that he'll be able to see whatever Bilbo grabs, then he can blast Bilbo with fire even if he can't see him. Right, but Bilbo is not quite so unlearned in dragon lore as all that. As Smaug hoped to get him to come near so easily, he was disappointed. So Bilbo says, "No thank you, O Smaug the Tremendous. I did not come for presents. I only wished to have a look at you and see if you were truly as great as tales say. I did not believe them." "Do you now?" said the dragon, somewhat flattered, even though he did not believe a word of it. "Truly, songs and tales fall utterly short of the reality, O Smaug, the greatest and chiefest and greatest of calamities," replied Bilbo. "You have nice manners for a thief and a liar," said the dragon. "You seem familiar with my name, but I don't seem to remember smelling you before. Who are you, and where do you come from, may I ask?" "You may indeed. I come from under the hill, and under the hills, and over the hills my path led, and through the air. I am he that walks unseen." "So I can well believe," said Smaug, "but that is hardly your usual name." "I am the clue finder, the web cutter, the stinging fly. I was chosen for the lucky number." "Lovely titles," sneered the dragon, "but lucky numbers don't always come off. I am he that buries his friends alive and drowns them and draws them alive again from the water. I come from the end of a bag, but no bag went over me." Those don't sound so credible, scoffed Smaug. I am the friend of bears and the guest of eagles. I am ring wearer and luck wearer, and I am barrel rider, went on Bilbo, beginning to be pleased with his riddling. That's better, said Smaug, but don't let your imagination run away with you. This is, of course, the proper way to talk to dragons if you don't want to reveal your proper name, which is wise, and don't want to infuriate them by a flat refusal, which is also wise. No dragon can resist the fascination of riddling talk and wasting time trying to understand it. Anyway, so Smaug is chuckling and having fun, but he's also thinking very wicked thoughts. He basically he thinks it's the lake men of the lake town who it's some scheme of theirs. And so he says, very well, O Barrel Rider. Maybe Barrel was your pony's name, and maybe not, though it was fat enough. You may walk unseen, but you did not walk all the way. Let me tell you, I ate 6 ponies last night, and I shall catch and eat all the others before long. In return for the excellent meal, I will give you one piece of advice for your help. Don't have any more to do with dwarves than you can help. Dwarves, said Bilbo in pretended surprise. Don't talk to me, said Smaug. I know the smell and taste of dwarf. No one better. Don't tell me that I can eat a dwarf-ridden pony and not know it. You will come to a bad end if you go with such friends, thief, barrel rider. I don't mind if you go back and tell them so from me. But he did not tell Bilbo there was one smell he could not quite make out at all. Hobbit smell. It was quite outside his experience and puzzled him mightily. I suppose you got a fair price for that cup last night, he went on. Come now, did you? Nothing at all? Well, that's just like them. And I suppose they are skulking outside, and your job is to do all the dangerous work and get what you can when I'm not looking. For them? And you will get a fair share? Don't believe it. If you get off alive, you will be lucky. This, of course, is the danger of talking to dragons, because the dragons, if they speak and they look you in the eye, they can put you under the dragon spell, which when you're under spell, will believe things that they say. Bilbo, however, he's beginning to have doubts, but he actually managed to overcome them. And he says, I tell you that gold was only an afterthought with us. We came over hill and under hill by wave and wind for revenge. Surely, O Smaug, the unaccessibly wealthy, you must realize that your success has made you some bitter enemies. Then Smaug really did laugh, a devastating sound which shook Bilbo to the floor, while far up in the tunnel the dwarves huddled together and imagined that the hobbit had come to a sudden and nasty end. Revenge, he snorted, and the light of his eyes lit the hall from floor to ceiling like scarlet lightning. Revenge! The king under the mountain is dead. Where are his kin that dare seek revenge? Girion, lord of Dale, is dead, and I have eaten his people like a wolf among sheep. And where are his sons' sons that dare approach me? I kill where I wish, and none dare resist. I laid low the warriors of old, and their like is not in the world today. Then I was but young and tender. Now I'm old and strong, strong, thief in the shadows, he gloated. My armor is like tenfold shields, my teeth are swords, my claws spears, the shock of my tail a thunderbolt, my wings a hurricane, and my breath death. I have always understood, said Bilbo in a frightened squeak, that dragons were soft underneath, especially in the region of the chest. But doubtless one so fortified has thought of that. The dragon stopped short in his boasting. Your information is antiquated, he snapped. I am armored above and below with iron scales and hard gems. No blade can pierce me. I might have guessed it, said Bilbo. Truly as there is nowhere to be found the equal of Lord Smaug the Impenetrable. What magnificence to possess a waistcoat of fine diamonds! Yes, it is rare and wonderful indeed, said Smaug, absurdly pleased. He did not know that the hobbit had already caught a glimpse of his peculiar undercovering on the previous vision, was itching for a closer view for reasons of his own. The dragon rolled over. Look, he said, what do you say to that? And Bilbo begins to praise Smaug's glorious coat, but inside he's thinking, old fool, why there's a large patch in the hollow of his left breast as bare as a snail out of its shell. And so Bilbo then flees, and Smaug blasts fire after him. Bilbo manages to escape. He gets outside and he tells the dwarves about what happened in there. And there's an old thrush sitting by that listens as well. And Bilbo says, drat the bird, I believe he's listening. I don't like the look of him. And he chucks a stone at him. But Thorin tells him to leave the thrushes alone because the thrushes are very old birds and they're friendly. And the men of Dale used to have the trick of understanding their language and use them for messengers to fly to the men of the lake and elsewhere. Anyway, so they start discussing dragon slaying and all this. And Bilbo convinces them all to get inside the tunnel instead of being out on the mountain ledge and to close the door. And so they all go in, and they don't do it too soon, because as soon as the door shuts and they're trapped in the mountain, the side of the mountain is blasted with dragon fire because Smaug snuck out in the night and just started blasting the side of the mountain, dragon fire, and bringing down boulders and all this stuff. And then, as Smaug is breaking rocks to pieces, smashing walls and cliff with the lashings of his huge tail to their lofty little camping ground, the scorched grass, the thrush's stone, the snail-covered walls, the narrow ledge, and all disappeared in a jumble of smithereens, and an avalanche of splintered stones fell over the cliff into the valley below. Smaug had left his lair in silent stealth, quietly soared in the air, and then floated heavy and slow in the dark like a monstrous crow, down the wind towards the west of the mountain in the hopes of catching unawares something or somebody there, and of spying the outlet to the passage which the thief had used. This was the outburst of his wrath when he could find nobody and see nothing, even where he guessed the outlet must actually be. After he had let off his rage and sway, he felt better, and he thought in his heart that he would not be troubled again from that direction. In the meantime, he had further vengeance to take. "Barrel rider," he snorted, "your feet came from the water side, and up the water you came without a doubt. I don't know your smell, but if you are not one of those men of the lake, you had their help. They shall see me, and remember who is the real king under the mountain." He rose in fire and went away south toward the running river. That is the conclusion of chapter 12 of The Hobbit. We will be back with chapter 13 coming.